If you know anything about bourbon, you've probably had Buffalo Trace. And if you've had Buffalo Trace, you absolutely know about Eagle Rare Bourbon. Eagle Rare is a flagship bourbon at Buffalo Trace. It's aged at least 10 years and is one of the more patriotic whiskeys on the market. And people go wild for it. Once an easy bottle to get has now become a rare find, some pun intended. But something you might not know is that Eagle Rare wasn't always a Buffalo Trace product. Its origins not only surprised me, but threw me down a bourbon whiskey history rabbit hole that left me in shock. Let me take you all the way back to Eagle Rare's inception by a Bourbon Hall of Famer. In the year 1962, Four Roses Distillery decided to hire Charles L. Bean, the grandnephew of Jim Beam. Yeah, that one. Only 6 years into the job, he became the fourth master distiller at Four Roses. A year later, in 1969, he introduced Benchmark to the whiskey world. And 6 years later, in 1975, Charles and Four Roses needed to compete with the popular bird-themed whiskey that sat at 101 proof, so they decided to create their own bird-themed 101 proof whiskey as well. Eagle Rare was born. But it's not the Eagle Rare we know today. It still sat at 10 years old, but it was 11 proof points higher than it is now, at 101 proof. Charles would retire in 1984, and Four Roses would sell the Eagle Rare brand to Sazerac in 1989. They bottled this version of Eagle Rare with sourced whiskey, potentially from Heaven Hill. There was even a few years where the bottle said it was made in New Orleans, since that was the headquarters of Sazerac, even though it was probably never made there. But it wasn't long before Sazerac would purchase George T. Stagg Distillery, which later became the Buffalo Trace Distillery we know and love. Now, since 2005, Eagle Rare is still aged 10 years, but it's made at 90 proof, and is Buffalo Trace's second most popular brand. There are a few other unattainable expressions, one at 17 years and another at 25 years, but 10 is the standard. Charles passed away in 2007 and was then inducted posthumously to the Bourbon Hall of Fame in 2010. His wife, Mary Lee, accepted his award on his behalf. It's pretty cool to think that you could once have a bottle of Eagle Rare at 101 proof.